morning sun poured over the dusty streets of New Terra, casting long shadows that made the marketplace seem larger than it really was. Stalls were packed with bright fabrics, fresh fruit, mechanical tools, and strange gadgets, some of which only humans could make. Amid the lively chatter and haggling, an old man slowly pushed his wooden cart, balancing clay jars filled with water. His name was Raffi. People often overlooked him, or worse, made jokes about his small, frail frame. Yet every jar he carried was perfectly sealed, and every step he took had a careful rhythm, as if he were performing a quiet dance with the world around him. Most people ignored the old water vendor, but not everyone. Raffi's eyes moved quickly, scanning every person who passed by. He was careful, alert, and aware of everything. Yet he wore the calm face of an ordinary old man. Children giggled as he passed, and young men sometimes whispered, "Why bother with water in the market? There are machines everywhere." He never answered, only smiled faintly and continued his work. That morning, the marketplace was unusually quiet. People sensed something different, something foreign approaching. Then, a hum of sleek engines broke the air, and a group of aliens arrived. They were tall and thin, with shimmering skin that reflected the morning light in colors no human could name. Their eyes were wide and bright, showing intelligence, curiosity, and at the same time, a sort of arrogance. They moved with perfect coordination, stepping lightly and observing every detail around them. Raffi noticed them immediately, though he did not show it. He adjusted the jars on his cart, straightened his back a little, and continued selling. The aliens stopped in front of his cart, tilting their heads as if studying some rare artifact. One of them, slightly taller than the rest and wearing a band of glowing symbols across its chest, pointed at Raffi's jars. "These containers, primitive," the alien said in a voice that vibrated softly. "How do you still use them?" The alien's companions laughed, a strange metallic sound that echoed across the marketplace. Water? From clay jars? Dawn, tiger, vampire, dawn.
"Your species is amusing."
Raffi paused, holding a jar gently in his hands. He looked at them with steady eyes. Water is simple, but it is also necessary. Everyone needs it, whether they are strong or small, rich or poor, he said softly. His voice was quiet, but firm. The aliens stared at him, unsure how to respond. One of them bent closer, examining a jar. "Why bother with this old method?" it asked. "We have machines. We have purity controls. This is outdated." Raffi smiled faintly. "Machines can break. Clay lasts longer." "Water stays cool. It is simple, but it works." The tallest alien laughed again, and this time, the other aliens joined in, forming a chorus of mocking tones. The humans nearby watched silently. Some hid their smiles, embarrassed for Raffi. Others whispered among themselves, questioning why he would even respond. Yet, Raffi did not seem embarrassed. He moved slowly, offering a jar to a nearby child, who drank gratefully and giggled. The child's innocent reaction seemed to irritate the aliens more. "Your species?" the alien said, shaking its head. "So weak, so slow." Raffi's eyes narrowed, but only slightly. But he looked past them, toward a group of humans observing quietly. Among them were his squad members, young adults trained for planetary security and exploration. Blending into the marketplace like ordinary citizens, they were waiting, watching. They trusted Raffi. To them, he was more than a vendor. He was their guide, their strategist, and the mind they relied upon in situations far beyond simple markets. The aliens continued to circle him, touching the jars, making strange gestures, and whispering to one another. They assumed they understood everything about him. That was their mistake. "Do you sell more than water?" asked one alien, tilting its head. "Do you sell knowledge? Or weapons?" Raffi shook his head. "I sell water. And sometimes people learn from the quiet things they see." The aliens looked at him strangely. One of them stepped closer, almost poking a jar with a finger. "You hide something." "All humans hide weakness. You are no exception." Raffi finally set the jar down carefully, aligning it perfectly with the others. His movements were slow but precise, almost hypnotic. He looked directly at the tallest alien, and his voice was soft, but it carried weight. "Not all strength is loud. Not all power is obvious. Sometimes the smallest things matter most." The alien blinked, unsure what to say. Its companions shifted uncomfortably, sensing they might be missing something. But arrogance held them in place. They laughed one final time before moving away, believing they had made a point. Raffi watched them go with calm eyes. The marketplace seemed to breathe again. People whispered about the strange visitors and the old man who had not run or trembled under ridicule. "Who is he?" one woman asked. "Just an old water vendor," another replied. Yet her voice lacked certainty. Raffi turned slowly to his squad members, who approached without drawing attention. "They are clever, but careless," he said quietly. "They underestimate everything they cannot immediately measure. That is their weakness." One squad member, a young woman named Lena, frowned. They seemed so powerful. "How can you be so calm?" Raffi smiled faintly. "Appearances deceive." "Always remember that. They think they understand, but they only see what they want." True observation requires patience. He moved through the crowd with measured steps, distributing water jars to those in need, while his squad followed closely. Every gesture, every glance, every movement was deliberate. He showed humility, but each action carried hidden intent. His team understood. The market was not just a place of trade. It was a place to study, to learn, to prepare. As the aliens left the marketplace, they exchanged sharp glances, still laughing. But there was an edge of uncertainty now. Raffi did not need to chase them or threaten them. He had already planted doubt in their minds. They assumed humans were weak. They assumed they were obvious. They assumed that this old man was harmless. And that assumption would soon be the first of many mistakes. The rest of the morning passed quietly. The market returned to its normal rhythm, and Raffi continued his work with patient focus. Children ran past, playing, and older vendors offered him smiles and nods of respect. None could guess the depth of his skill or the importance of the quiet signals he exchanged with his squad. He carried the jars of water with care, but every step was a lesson in strategy, every gesture a demonstration of discipline. When the sun reached its peak, the old water vendor finally paused. Leaning on the edge of his cart, he surveyed the market, noting where newcomers had gathered, where the aliens had observed most closely, and where his squad had positioned themselves. Everything was connected in his mind. The jars, the people, the market layout, the routes in and out. Nothing was accidental, and nothing escaped him. He muttered to himself, just under his breath. A quiet thought meant only for him. They do not see. They never see. The squad members, who had watched from a distance, nodded to each other. To them, Raffi was more than he seemed, a mind capable of anticipating movements, understanding behavior, and predicting outcomes with incredible precision. He was calm, steady, and deceptively ordinary. By the time the market began to close, the aliens were gone, leaving behind only curiosity and a lingering sense of uncertainty. People whispered about the encounter, some in admiration, some in doubt. Raffi packed his jars carefully, aligning them for transport back to his modest home. He walked with a slow, deliberate pace, yet each step carried the weight of knowledge, observation, and experience. He looked back once at the empty market square and smiled faintly. The world thought of him as small, weak, and ordinary. They did not know. They would not know, at least, not yet. For Raffi, the old water vendor, the day was not about being laughed at. It was about learning, observing, and preparing. One day, when the time was right, those who mocked him would see the truth. And when they did, they would never forget the quiet strength of the man they once thought harmless. The sun had barely started its climb the next day when Raffi pushed his cart out of the small alley behind his home. The jars of water glimmered faintly in the early light, the clay surface smooth and cool to the touch. The marketplace was quieter than usual, the hum of morning chatter slow and careful, as if people still felt the weight of yesterday's strange visitors. Rumors spread quickly among humans, tales of tall, shimmering aliens who mocked a harmless water vendor. Many wondered aloud why no one had stopped them. But those who truly knew Raffi already understood. He never needed to be stopped. He always knew what to do. Raffi moved slowly, deliberately, through the winding streets, his cart leaving faint tracks in the dusty ground. His eyes scanned every corner, every crowd, noting patterns, movements, and unusual behavior. His squad followed at a distance, blending in with the market-goers, keeping watch but remaining unseen. Among them were Lena, clever and alert, Jaren, strong and cautious, and Miko, young but quick to learn. Together they formed a team that relied on Raffi not for speed or brute strength, but for insight, planning, and observation. As he reached the center of the market, Raffi noticed a small group of alien scouts standing at the edge of the square. They did not enter, only observed, their heads tilting, shimmering skin reflecting the sunlight. They spoke in quiet tones that humans could not fully comprehend. Raffi paused, placing a jar of water on the cart, and let his eyes rest on them. "They are studying again," he muttered softly, almost to himself. "Curious, but impatient. They believe intelligence can be seen on the surface." Lena, walking beside him, frowned. "Do you think they will return? Or worse, come back with more of their..." Raffi smiled faintly. "They will return, but it will not be as they expect."
They only see what they want to see. They will miss what is important.
The market continued its rhythm. Vendors called out, selling fruits, tools, fabrics, and trinkets.
Children ran past, some stopping to watch Raffi, fascinated by the care he gave to each jar. No one noticed the subtle signals he sent to his squad members. Slight gestures of the hand, a tilt of the head, the careful alignment of jars. Each motion was a message, invisible to ordinary eyes. Raffi stopped near a quiet corner where a display of alien artifacts had been set up by a curious merchant. The devices were strange, intricate, and delicate, with moving parts that glowed faintly. He studied one carefully, turning it in his hands. "Simple flaws," he whispered. "Patterns they do not see.
Gaps in logic they never notice." Jaren, observing quietly, leaned closer. "You can read this so easily." "It confuses me. To them, it is advanced technology."
To you, it is a puzzle, waiting to be solved. Intelligence is not about machines or height or speed. It is about observation, patience, and understanding. Watch carefully, and you see more than they ever show. Meanwhile, the alien scouts continued to linger. They were cautious, moving in patterns that suggested curiosity but also calculation. Raffi adjusted the jars on his cart with a small, precise motion, signaling to his squad. Lena understood immediately. Jaren and Miko followed the subtle commands without hesitation. The group shifted slightly, moving silently to positions that gave them advantage without revealing themselves. Suddenly, one of the aliens approached a vendor selling small mechanical tools. It reached out, touching a device that whirred and sparked. The vendor flinched, unsure if the alien's touch would damage the fragile mechanism. Raffi stepped closer, calmly and deliberately.
"Observe, but do not destroy," he said softly, though loud enough for the alien to hear.
His voice carried calm authority, and the alien froze, tilting its head in curiosity.
"You speak boldly for your kind,"
the alien said, its voice smooth but cautious.
Raffi smiled faintly. "Boldness is unnecessary when understanding is clear." The alien blinked, sensing something unusual in him.
It took a step back, as if uncertain what to make of the frail-looking human. Meanwhile, Raffi's squad watched silently, ready to act if needed, but trusting in his guidance. As the day progressed, Raffi noticed a pattern in the aliens' movements. They were examining certain areas of the market more than others, focusing on clusters of human activity. He observed the timing of their steps, the way they tilted their heads, and how they hesitated before interacting with people or objects. Every detail mattered.
Every pause held meaning. He whispered instructions to his squad through subtle signals, moving them strategically.
Lena shifted behind a fruit stall, Jaren positioned near a narrow alley, and Miko quietly took note of the exits and entrances. Together, under Raffi's careful guidance, they began to map the aliens' behavior. It was not a matter of confrontation. It was a lesson in anticipation, preparation, and understanding. Around midday, one of the aliens returned to Raffi's cart, pretending to examine a jar of water. Its movements were precise, careful, but tentative. "Why do you not fear us?" it asked, tilting its head. Raffi's hands rested lightly on the jar, his eyes meeting the aliens. Fear is wasted on those who do not understand. Observation teaches more than fear ever will. The alien paused, trying to interpret the meaning. "You are different from others of your kind," it said slowly. Raffi nodded. Sometimes the quietest can teach the loudest lessons. At that moment, a small child ran past, tripping over a loose stone. Raffi moved swiftly, catching the child before it could fall, steadying him with a gentle hand. The alien watched, intrigued, its sensors perhaps detecting more than just a simple act of kindness. "This human." He moves carefully, it murmured to its companions.
"But there is precision, calculation."
Raffi returned the child to its mother and smiled gently. Then he turned back to his squad, signaling that it was time for the next observation. They followed him silently, blending into the crowd. Throughout the afternoon, Raffi guided his squad in observing, analyzing, and predicting the aliens' next moves. He taught them without speaking much, showing them that patience and awareness were more powerful than technology or intimidation. They watched the aliens make small errors, misjudgments, and repeated behaviors that no one else noticed. Each observation was recorded silently in the minds of Raffi and his squad. By late afternoon, the alien scouts had grown restless. Their movements became less careful, more hurried. Raffi noticed the change immediately. "They are impatient," he whispered to Lena. "They believe knowledge comes quickly. That is their mistake." Lena nodded, understanding. "They underestimate us. They do not see what we see." Raffi smiled faintly, his eyes calm and bright.
"And that is why we prepare quietly. Tomorrow they will return, thinking they are clever."
But we will know their pattern, and we will act, not with force, but with intelligence. As the market began to close, Raffi packed his jars with care, lining them neatly on the cart. The aliens had already started to leave, gliding away silently, their reflections shimmering in the fading sunlight. They believed they had learned all they could, yet Raffi knew otherwise. He walked home with his squad, each step slow and deliberate. His mind raced, not with fear or anger, but with planning, strategy, and observation. Every movement of the aliens, every pause, every gesture had been noted. Every pattern had been analyzed, and all of it would be used to prepare for the day they returned. When he reached the quiet of his home, Raffi set down the jars and rested briefly. He looked out the small window at the marketplace below, now empty and calm. He knew that appearances were deceptive. The aliens saw only what they wanted to see: weakness, ordinariness, and simplicity. They did not see Raffi's mind, the depth of his observation, or the careful coordination with his squad. Raffi sat quietly, thinking about the day's lessons. Every gesture, every movement, every observation was part of a larger plan. The market was not just a place of trade. It was a place of preparation, of learning, of strategy. And Raffi, the old water vendor, was its quiet master. His squad gathered around him, looking to him for guidance. They were young, eager, and full of energy, but they understood one thing clearly. Raffi saw more than anyone else. He noticed patterns where others saw only chaos. He predicted behavior where others saw only randomness, and he guided them with subtle, silent wisdom that would prove far more powerful than any weapon. "We must be ready," Raffi said softly, more to himself than to anyone else. "They will return. And when they do, we will show them that the smallest, quietest, most unassuming can be the cleverest of all." His eyes settled on the jars of water, each one a simple vessel, yet perfectly made, holding life and refreshment for anyone who needed it. To outsiders, it seemed ordinary. To those who knew Raffi, it was a reminder that even the simplest things could hold power far greater than the loudest, most advanced technology. And so the day ended, with the market quiet and the aliens gone. But the sense of anticipation strong. Raffi, the old water vendor, had observed, analyzed, and prepared. He had taught his squad without words, shown them the value of patience, awareness, and strategy. And in the quiet of the evening, he smiled faintly, knowing that tomorrow would bring a new opportunity, a chance to prove that intelligence, not size or strength, could win any encounter. The next morning, the marketplace was alive with the usual sounds: vendors calling out, children laughing, wheels creaking over dusty streets. But this day carried a quiet tension that only Raffi and his squad seemed to notice. The aliens were returning, not as observers, but with purpose. Their sleek forms shimmered at the edge of the market as they glided forward, moving with careful calculation. They had learned nothing from the day before, or at least they assumed they had. Raffi adjusted the jars on his cart, lining them perfectly, each one in its assigned spot. He moved slowly, deliberately, scanning the streets and the crowds. His squad followed his subtle cues: tilts of the head, shifts of weight, tiny movements that no ordinary person would notice. Lena, Jaren, and Miko were ready, though their faces showed a mixture of excitement and focus. They knew that today, observation would become strategy. As the aliens stepped into the marketplace, they began inspecting again. This time, they moved with more confidence, believing that the humans were ordinary and predictable. One of them, taller than the others, paused near Raffi's cart. It looked at the old water vendor with curiosity, tilting its head. "Yesterday, you observed us," it said, its voice smooth but cautious. "You learned quickly.
Observation is simple. Understanding is harder.
You have shown what you believe is clever, but cleverness is not always complete." It had underestimated Raffi once, and he sensed that he might be underestimating him again. Meanwhile, Raffi's squad subtly moved into positions, guided by his silent commands. Every action was coordinated yet invisible to outsiders. Raffi began with small diversions. He positioned a few jars in a way that created shadows across the street, blocking direct paths and subtly changing the way the aliens moved. He asked vendors to adjust their displays, creating obstacles that were ordinary to humans but confusing to the aliens. The squad followed quietly, guiding people without drawing attention. To an outsider, it seemed like the market was bustling naturally, but in reality, every move had purpose. Lena whispered to Jaren and Miko, following Raffi's lead. "Notice how he uses ordinary things, jars, shadows, even people walking, to control movement."
"It's incredible," Nothing is forced.
It's all subtle, yet powerful. Rafi watched the aliens carefully. Their movements were calculated but rigid. They reacted to changes but never anticipated them. He noticed patterns. They paused at corners, hesitated at narrow passages, and avoided direct contact with the humans they did not understand. He mapped their behavior silently in his mind, predicting their next steps. Then he began guiding his squad into small actions that seemed coincidental but were carefully planned. Miko tripped slightly over a stone, sending a small jar rolling down the street. The aliens turned immediately, their sensors alert, only to find the jar harmless and intact. Lena stepped behind a fabric stall, moving a cloth just enough to shift the sunlight, creating glare in the aliens' vision. They stopped, blinking and recalibrating, confused by these minor disruptions. Rafi smiled faintly. "They see the surface, but not the connections," he whispered. "They see incidents, but not the plan." By midday, the aliens had started to grow frustrated. Their movements became sharper, less graceful. They tried to predict what humans would do, but every time they acted, something shifted. Something unexpected interfered with their calculations, and every shift was guided silently by Rafi. The market had become a living puzzle. Vendors, children, carts, jars, even sunlight and shadows, all moved subtly under Rafi's direction. The aliens began noticing patterns they could not solve. Each path they took led to small obstacles, not dangerous but confusing. Each time they paused, Rafi's team adjusted, guiding them toward predictably unpredictable paths.
"Look at this," Lena whispered, pointing to one corner. "He's leading them like pieces on a board, but the pieces are all ordinary humans and objects."
His eyes were focused, calm, and unshakable. Every detail mattered. The position of a cart, the movement of a child, the direction of sunlight reflecting off metal. Each adjustment created a subtle effect, an influence the aliens could not calculate. By late afternoon, the aliens realized they were trapped in a kind of maze, not a physical cage, but a mental one. Every path seemed open at first, but their sensors and calculations kept leading them into confusion. They paused, hovering over the marketplace, attempting to understand why their superior intelligence could not predict the humans' actions. Rafi took a deep breath and spoke softly, more to his squad than anyone else. "They rely on speed, technology, and calculation. We rely on awareness, patience, and understanding. Today, their assumption will fail." Lena smiled quietly. "And they don't even know it yet." With careful gestures, Rafi directed his squad toward positions that would appear random to the aliens. Jaren positioned a cart in a narrow passage, blocking the way and forcing the aliens to pause. Miko subtly shifted a fabric stall, creating reflections that distracted their sensors. Lena signaled to a group of children playing nearby, moving them slightly along a path that guided the aliens' attention without alarming them. The aliens were careful, intelligent, and patient. But Rafi's planning was deeper. He understood their behavior in ways they could not comprehend. Each action of the squad, each subtle manipulation of the environment, created a pattern the aliens could not see, only react to. And every reaction was exactly what Rafi wanted. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the market, the aliens became aware of their confusion. Their sensors were functioning perfectly, but they could not anticipate the humans' actions. They hovered, uncertain, and observed Rafi closely. "You are clever," the tallest alien said quietly.
"Your species, unexpected."
Rafi smiled faintly, calm and collected. "Cleverness is simple. Understanding is what matters. You observe quickly, but you do not see fully."
"You act on assumptions, but the truth is hidden in what you do not notice."
They had assumed humans were weak, ordinary, predictable. They had underestimated the quiet, small, and seemingly insignificant, and now they realized their mistake. Rafi guided his squad in a final subtle maneuver. They arranged the market in a pattern that looked random, but each obstacle, shadow, and movement directed the aliens back toward the edge of the marketplace. Each step the aliens took was predictable, though they did not know it. Every misstep was a lesson, demonstrating that intelligence was not only measured by technology or size, but by observation, planning, and coordination. By evening, the aliens finally hovered near the exit, realizing that further movement would lead them into more confusion. They studied Raffi one last time, their shimmering forms reflecting uncertainty and respect. Slowly, they moved away, leaving the market, not in retreat, but in contemplation. They had learned, reluctantly, that humans could be clever, resourceful, and far more capable than they had assumed. Raffi and his squad moved through the quiet market afterward, aligning jars, adjusting stalls, and restoring the marketplace to its ordinary rhythm. Vendors and children returned to their routines, unaware of the careful orchestration that had just unfolded. Raffi's smile was faint, quiet, but full of satisfaction. He had shown his squad the power of observation, strategy, and subtle influence, all without confrontation. Lena, walking beside him, whispered, "They won't forget this, but neither will we."
You taught us more than strategy. You taught us how to see.
Raffi nodded quietly. Observation is only the first step. Understanding, patience, and coordination turn observation into action. Today they learned a lesson without knowing it. Tomorrow we will be ready for anything because we see more than they will ever expect.
As the sun set, casting golden light across the streets of New Terra, Raffi pushed his cart slowly toward home.
His squad followed, silent and thoughtful. The market was calm, ordinary, and peaceful again. But beneath the surface, a lesson had been taught. Intelligence, patience, and understanding had triumphed over arrogance, assumptions, and technology alone. Raffi paused briefly to glance back at the marketplace. The jars on his cart caught the last rays of sunlight, shining quietly, perfectly, without boast or exaggeration. To anyone else, they were simple containers of water. To those who truly knew Raffi, they were symbols of precision, preparation, and mastery. And in the quiet of that evening, Raffi thought to himself, they still do not know the depth of what humans can do. And that is just as it should be. The squad walked home with him, carrying the lesson in their minds and the respect for their leader in their hearts. The aliens had come, mocked, and observed, and in return, they had been subtly outsmarted, not through confrontation or force, but through awareness, intelligence, and the quiet guidance of a man who seemed at first glance to be nothing more than an old water vendor. The sun rose gently over New Terra, painting the marketplace in warm golden light. The day was ordinary at first glance, with vendors opening stalls, children running between carts, and citizens going about their routines. But Raffi, the old water vendor, knew this day would not be ordinary. The aliens were returning, not to observe this time, but to challenge, to test, to assert their superiority. They had been confused, frustrated, and humbled in previous visits. Today, they would learn something far greater. Raffi adjusted his jars carefully on the cart, each one aligned perfectly, reflecting light in neat patterns. His squad followed quietly, blending into the market as ordinary humans. Lena, Jaren, and Miko exchanged small nods, ready to act as needed. Raffi moved with calm authority, his eyes scanning the streets, the corners, the small alleys. Every detail mattered. The angle of the sunlight, the position of carts, the shadows of trees, even the rhythm of footsteps around them. The aliens appeared at the edge of the market, their shimmering forms cutting through the morning light. This time, they were larger in number, moving with precision, confidence, and a sense of authority. They had assumed that by coming back with more strength, they could outmatch the humans, but Raffi had anticipated their arrival. He stepped forward slightly, tilting a jar to catch the sunlight in a certain way. The glint reflected directly toward the aliens, drawing their attention. "Welcome," he said calmly, his voice soft but clear. "You return. Observation is always more meaningful when repeated. The tallest alien, the one who had spoken to him before, moved closer.
We see you again. You confuse us.
Yesterday, we believed we understood. Today, we will understand fully.
Rafi smiled faintly. Understanding comes not from force, nor from display.
It comes from awareness, patience, and insight. You may watch, but seeing is not the same as understanding. The aliens looked at each other, unsure. They had tried to calculate humans, but every attempt had failed. Their assumptions about weakness and predictability were shattered. And now, they realized that Rafi was no ordinary human. They had never truly understood the depth of his mind. As the aliens advanced slowly into the marketplace, Rafi signaled subtly to his squad. A tilt of the head, a gentle brush of the hand across a jar, a slight shift in stance, all invisible to anyone else. The squad responded instantly, moving with precision, yet appearing casual. They positioned themselves strategically, near narrow alleys, behind carts, close to reflective surfaces. Every placement had purpose. Rafi began his plan with gentle adjustments. He repositioned a few jars, creating small reflections that distracted the alien's sensors. Lena subtly shifted a cloth stall, causing sunlight to change angles and create confusion. Miko guided a small group of children through the streets, their laughter echoing, but leading the aliens along predictable paths. Jaren moved carts to narrow certain streets, subtly guiding the aliens toward areas Rafi had prepared. The aliens paused frequently, their sensors detecting anomalies they could not explain. They had assumed that humans were predictable and weak. Every misstep they encountered, every delay caused by ordinary objects and ordinary humans, frustrated them. Their advanced technology could not anticipate the subtle orchestration before them. Rafi smiled quietly, moving among the jars as if tending to them for routine purposes. But each movement had meaning. Each gesture directed the aliens toward predictable reactions without them realizing it. They thought they were exploring freely, but in truth, every step they took was part of Rafi's carefully designed plan. Hours passed, the sun climbing higher in the sky. The aliens tried to assert control, attempting to measure the humans' responses using gestures, signals, and scanning devices. Yet every attempt led them into subtle challenges, reflections of light that altered their focus, slight obstacles that shifted their path, and coordinated movements from humans that seemed spontaneous but were planned. Rafi observed silently, speaking rarely. His squad followed every instruction, every subtle cue, their trust in him absolute. Each adjustment was quiet, gentle, and non-confrontational, yet incredibly effective. The aliens grew increasingly aware of their inability to fully control the situation. Finally, as afternoon approached, Rafi initiated the final sequence of his plan. He moved a single jar, tilting it just enough to catch sunlight and project a pattern across the ground. The pattern seemed ordinary, but it created a trail that led the aliens toward the center of the marketplace, where their confusion would reach its peak. "Follow carefully," Rafi whispered to his squad, though no one else could hear. "Observe the patterns. Respond without haste. Let them see what patience and awareness can achieve." The aliens moved into the pattern, their sensors alert, their minds calculating. But every move triggered a subtle response. Sunlight reflected from a jar. A cart shifted slightly. A cloth fluttered in a breeze. They reacted, recalibrating constantly, yet never realizing that every reaction had been anticipated. Lena moved quietly beside Rafi, whispering, "It's beautiful, how he guides them without force. They think they control the situation, but he controls them entirely." Rafi nodded, calm and composed. Strength is not always loud. Intelligence is not always obvious. The smallest, quietest actions can guide the largest, most powerful forces, when done with understanding. The aliens paused, sensing the impossibility of their situation. They had entered the market with confidence, expecting to assert dominance. expecting humans to be predictable, but every step had led them deeper into a web of observation and strategy. They were not trapped physically, but their pride and assumptions had been challenged at every turn. Raffi and his squad remained calm. Blending into the marketplace, they did not raise their voices, did not act aggressively, and did not display fear. Yet every movement, every adjustment, every gesture guided the aliens further into subtle understanding. An understanding they had not anticipated. The tallest alien hovered near the center, looking at Raffi. "You outsmart us." Raffi smiled faintly, quiet and gentle. "Strength is not only measured in speed, size, or technology. True strength is patience, understanding, and awareness. You assumed weakness, but you were mistaken." The other aliens glanced at each other, sensing a truth they had not expected. They had been proud, arrogant, and confident, and yet a single old human had guided them through a maze of strategy and subtlety, without raising his voice or displaying aggression. Slowly, deliberately, the aliens began to retreat, not in fear, but in reflection. They had learned a valuable lesson. Humans could be clever, resourceful, and coordinated in ways they could not have anticipated. The marketplace, ordinary to most, had become a field of strategy, observation, and subtle influence, orchestrated entirely by Raffi and his squad. As the aliens left, Raffi and his squad restored the market to its normal rhythm. Vendors continued selling their goods. Children ran and played, and ordinary life resumed. To any observer, it seemed as if nothing unusual had occurred. Yet those who had seen closely, those who had worked alongside Raffi, understood the depth of what had been achieved. Lena turned to Raffi quietly. "You didn't fight them. You didn't need to. You outsmarted them entirely." Raffi nodded, calm and gentle. "Force is unnecessary when understanding is complete. Patience, observation, and coordination can accomplish what strength alone cannot." The squad walked home with him, carrying not only jars of water, but also lessons in strategy, patience, and intelligence. They had seen firsthand how an ordinary human, underestimated and overlooked, could guide an entire situation to success without confrontation or aggression. As the sun set over New Terra, Raffi paused outside his home, looking at the market in the distance. The jars on his cart glimmered faintly in the evening light. They were simple containers, but they symbolized precision, care, and mastery. To most, he was an ordinary water vendor. To those who had witnessed his guidance, he was a strategist, a mentor, and a quietly brilliant mind. Raffi smiled faintly to himself. The aliens had come. Thinking humans were weak and predictable, they had left, humbled, carrying a lesson about intelligence, patience, and subtle power. The marketplace returned to its ordinary rhythm, but the quiet triumph of strategy and understanding remained. He turned to his squad, all smiling quietly, understanding that the day had been a success. "Remember," he said softly, "the smallest, quietest actions can change the largest outcomes. Strength is not always loud. Intelligence is not always obvious, and the world will underestimate you until it sees the result." Lena, Jaren, and Miko nodded, absorbing the lesson fully. They had followed a water vendor through a day of careful observation, strategic planning, and subtle guidance, and they had learned that true power often lies in the mind, not in force. Raffi wheeled his cart slowly toward home, his mind calm, his heart satisfied. The jars of water were ordinary, yet they represented something far greater: preparation, precision, and quiet mastery. The aliens had mocked him, underestimated him, and left humbled. And Raffi, the old water vendor, had proven what humans could do when patience, intelligence, and understanding guided every action. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over New Terra. The marketplace was peaceful, ordinary, yet beneath the surface lay a quiet story of brilliance and subtle victory. And at the center of it all was Rafi, the old water vendor whose mind had proven far sharper than anyone had imagined. In the end, the marketplace returned to its normal rhythm. The jars reflected the fading sunlight, and Rafi pushed his cart home quietly, knowing that sometimes the smallest, calmest, most ordinary person could change the outcome of an entire day and leave an impression on even the most advanced minds. And with that, the humans and their quiet strategist had shown the aliens that intelligence, patience, and subtle guidance were the most powerful forces of all.